The spoon was halfway to her lips when a small voice suddenly shouted from the doorway. "Miss Nia, don't eat that." Nia froze. The dining room was quiet and elegant, with soft lights hanging from the chandelier above the table. Everything looked perfect: the neatly arranged plates, the warm bowl of soup in front of her, and the peaceful evening atmosphere. But the fear in that little voice instantly changed everything. Nia slowly turned her head toward the doorway. 7-year-old Amari stood there, her small hands shaking and her eyes wide with panic. Nia frowned gently. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" she asked calmly. Amari ran toward the table, her footsteps quick and nervous. Before Nia could react, the girl grabbed her wrist and pushed the spoon away from her mouth. The spoon fell back into the bowl with a soft clink. "Please don't eat it," Amari whispered, tears filling her eyes. Across the table, Marcus, Nia's husband, suddenly went still. For a moment, no one spoke. Marcus forced a small laugh, trying to break the silence. "Amari, what are you talking about?" he said casually. "You're scaring her," but Amari shook her head quickly. "I saw you," she said, her voice trembling. Marcus's smile faded slightly. "Saw me do what?" Amari pointed toward him. "You put something in her food." The room became completely silent. Nia slowly looked from Amari to Marcus. "Marcus, what is she talking about?" she asked quietly. Marcus leaned back in his chair and chuckled. "She's just a kid, Nia. Kids imagine things." But Amari's voice grew louder. "No, I saw it." Her small finger pointed directly at Marcus again. "You did it last night too, and the night before. You took a little brown bottle and put drops in her food." Nia felt her heart begin to pound, because suddenly something inside her mind started connecting. For months she had been feeling strange, constant headaches, extreme tiredness. And worst of all, her eyesight had been getting worse every week. Doctors couldn't explain why. Marcus had always been supportive, cooking meals for her every evening and telling her to rest. But now Amari's words echoed in her mind. "A little brown bottle." Nia slowly turned her eyes toward Marcus. "Marcus," she said carefully, "do you have something in your pocket?" Marcus's jaw tightened for a brief second, then he laughed again. "You really believing a child over me?" Nia didn't smile. "Just show me." Marcus didn't move, and that silence told Nia more than words ever could. Amari squeezed Nia's arm tightly. "Please, don't eat it," the little girl whispered again. Nia slowly pushed the bowl of soup away from her, then she looked Marcus straight in the eyes. "Marcus," she said quietly, "take whatever is in your pocket out right now." Marcus stared back at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly, he reached toward his pocket. And suddenly Nia realized something terrifying. This dinner was never meant to be safe. But when Marcus finally pulled his hand out of his pocket, the small brown bottle he revealed would change everything Nia thought she knew about her own marriage. Marcus's hand slid into his pocket slowly, like he was buying time. The room had gone so quiet Nia could hear the ticking of the antique clock on the wall, tick, 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 each second pressing heavier on her chest. Amari clutched the side of Nia's blouse, her tiny fingers balled tight like she was holding onto the only safe thing in the room. Marcus finally pulled his hand out, but it was empty. He raised both palms like somebody getting pulled over by the police. "See," he said with a thin smile, "nothing there, y'all acting like I'm some kind of villain." Nia didn't relax. Something about the way he said it made her skin crawl. "Other pocket," she said flatly. Marcus scoffed. "You serious right now?" "Yes," Nia replied, "dead serious." He hesitated again. That tiny pause stretched long enough to make the air feel thick. Then he reached into his jacket's inner pocket, and that's when Amari gasped. "There, that's it," the little girl cried. Marcus slowly pulled out a small brown bottle, no label, just a cheap plastic cap twisted tight. It was about the size of cough drops medicine, but darker, more secretive somehow. Nia stared at it like it was a loaded gun. "What is that?" she asked. Marcus rolled his eyes and set the bottle on the table with a soft clink. "Herbal supplement," he said. "You been tired, thought it might help." Nia leaned closer, squinting hard at the bottle. Her vision blurred around the edges, but she could still see the liquid inside, thick and cloudy. "You been putting this in my food?" she asked quietly. Marcus shrugged. "Just a few drops, relax." "It ain't poison." Amari started crying harder. "He lying, he do it every night when you go upstairs. I seen him in the kitchen." Marcus shot the girl a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Kid need to mind grown folks' business." Nia's stomach twisted. She turned back to Marcus, her voice steady but colder than ice. "Why would you put something in my food without telling me?" Marcus leaned back in his chair like the whole situation bored him. "You always stressed, Nia, always working, always complaining about headaches and your eyes hurting. I'm just trying to help." Nia let out a humorless laugh. "Funny," she said. "Because those problems started right around the time you started cooking every night." Marcus's jaw tightened. For a second, the polite husband mask slipped, and underneath it something darker peeked through. "You reaching," he muttered. But Nia's mind was racing now. The headaches, the dizziness, her eyesight slowly fading, doctors confused, and Marcus insisting on cooking every meal. A cold wave of realization rolled through her chest. "What exactly is in that bottle?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his fork and stabbed a piece of steak like the conversation was already over. "That girl got you paranoid," he said. "Eat your dinner before it gets cold." Nia stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to eat this?" she asked slowly. Marcus met her eyes and smiled. "Yeah," he said casually. "Why wouldn't you?" The smile didn't reach his eyes. Not even a little. Amari tugged on Nia's sleeve, whispering frantically, "Don't do it, please don't." Nia slowly pushed her plate away. "I'm not eating another bite of anything you cook," she said. Marcus slammed his fork down. The sudden noise made Amari jump. "You really gonna disrespect me like that?" Marcus snapped. Nia crossed her arms. "You really been poisoning me like that?" The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Marcus stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping low. "You should be real careful about throwing around words like poison, Nia." A chill ran down her spine. Because his tone didn't sound offended. It sounded warned. Amari whispered again, barely audible, "He gonna get mad." Nia placed one hand protectively on the little girl's shoulder and looked Marcus straight in the eye. "Then explain the bottle." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and then he laughed. Not the friendly laugh she'd heard 1,000 times before. This one was colder, meaner. "All right," he said slowly. "You really want to know?" Nia nodded once. Marcus tapped the bottle with his finger. "Because if you hear the truth," he said quietly, "you might wish you didn't." But what Marcus said next would make Nia realize the danger in her own home was far worse than poison, and the little girl standing beside her might be the only reason she was still alive. Marcus leaned back in his chair again, slow and casual, like he had all the time in the world. The little brown bottle sat between them on the table, quiet but loud at the same time, like it was holding a secret that didn't want to stay buried. Nia kept her eyes on him. Her chest was tight, but her mind was getting sharper by the second. Fear had a funny way of waking people up. "You said I might wish I didn't know the truth," Nia said calmly. "So go ahead, tell it." Marcus studied her face. For the first time that night, his expression looked almost amused. "You always were stubborn," he said. Amari sniffled quietly beside Nia, still clutching her arm. Marcus noticed. His eyes flicked down at the girl and something cold flashed through them. "You should have been in bed," he muttered. Amari shrank back a little. Nia stepped slightly in front of her without even thinking. Marcus saw it and smirked. "Aw," he said sarcastically, "look at you, playing hero." "Stop dancing around it," Nia replied. "What's in the bottle?" Marcus sighed like the whole thing was exhausting him. "Relax," he said, "it ain't poison." "If it was, you wouldn't still be sitting here." That sentence made Nia's stomach drop, because he was right. If it were poison, she would have been dead already. "So what is it?" she asked again. Marcus leaned forward and tapped the bottle with one finger. "It's something that slows things down," he said. Nia frowned. "What does that mean?" Marcus's smile grew slightly. "It means," he said, "it messes with your system little by little. Makes you tired, weak, dizzy sometimes." Nia's heartbeat started pounding again. "You've been doing this on purpose?" Marcus shrugged. "A few drops here and there." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "My eyesight, the headaches." Marcus tilted his head. "Side effects." Amari let out a quiet sob. "You're hurting her," the little girl cried. Marcus shot her a glare. "Kid, you got a real bad habit of talking." Nia's blood boiled. "Don't talk to her like that," she snapped. Marcus raised both hands mockingly. All right, everybody relax." But Nia wasn't relaxing because one question kept screaming in her mind. "Why?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up and walked slowly toward the kitchen counter, pouring himself a glass of water like they were just having an ordinary conversation. The calmness of it made everything worse. Finally, he turned back toward her. "You ever notice something, Nia?" he asked. She didn't respond. "You work too much," he continued. "Always busy, always running around handling business deals, property contracts, meetings." Nia's brow furrowed. "What does that have to do with anything?" Marcus took a sip of water. "Hard to keep up with all that when your health ain't great." The room went ice cold. Nia stared at him. "You wanted me sick," she said slowly. Marcus didn't deny it. Instead, he shrugged again. "Not sick," he said, "just slowed down." Amari looked up at Nia with wide, terrified eyes. Nia's hands began to tremble. "You've been slowly poisoning me so I'd be too weak to run my own business." Marcus smiled. "Now you catching on?" Nia felt rage flood through her veins. "You're insane." Marcus laughed softly. "No, Nia, I'm practical." He leaned against the counter. "You got a multi-million-dollar company, 3 properties, and a trust fund your daddy left you." Nia's breath caught. And suddenly everything clicked. Marcus wasn't trying to help her, he was trying to control her. "If I'm too sick to manage my business," she said quietly. Marcus finished the sentence for her. "Your husband takes over." Amari squeezed Nia's hand tightly. Marcus looked at them both. "You would have been fine," he said casually, "just tired all the time, maybe a little blind eventually. But alive." The cruelty of the words made Nia feel sick. "You were going to let me go blind," she whispered. Marcus didn't even flinch. "Collateral damage." The word hit like a slap. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Nia reached slowly across the table and grabbed the bottle. Marcus straightened. "Nia," he warned, but she ignored him. Instead, she stood up and walked straight toward the kitchen sink. Marcus pushed off the counter immediately. "Don't you do that?" Nia twisted the cap open. Amari watched with wide eyes. Marcus's voice turned sharp. "I said don't." Nia looked him dead in the eye, then she poured the entire bottle down the drain. The cloudy liquid swirled away in seconds. Marcus's face went dark, really dark, and the calm mask he'd been wearing all night finally cracked. "You just made a real stupid move," he said quietly. Nia didn't back down. "Call it even," she replied. Marcus stared at her. Then slowly he started walking toward her, not fast, not loud, just steady. And something about the way he moved made the hairs on Nia's arms stand up. Because this wasn't the Marcus she married, this was someone else, someone dangerous. Amari whispered behind her, voice shaking, "Miss Nia, he's mad." Marcus stopped a few feet away. His eyes were cold now. "You shouldn't have done that," he said again. Nia crossed her arms. "What are you going to do about it?" Marcus looked at her, then at the kitchen knives sitting on the counter. And when his gaze lingered there just a second too long, Nia realized something terrifying. This situation was about to get a whole lot worse. As Marcus's eyes drifted toward the knife block on the counter, Nia suddenly understood that pouring out the bottle might have saved her life, but it may have also started a fight she wasn't prepared to survive. Nia noticed the exact moment Marcus's eyes drifted to the knife block on the counter. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden movement, just a quick glance, but it was enough. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. Behind her, Amari's small fingers tightened around the back of Nia's shirt like she was holding onto a life raft. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, too small. Marcus stepped forward again, one slow step, then another. "You should have stayed out of the kitchen," he said quietly. Nia forced herself not to move back. Fear was crawling up her spine, but she refused to show it. "You should have stayed out of my food," she replied. Marcus smirked slightly, but the humor in his face was gone now. "What you did," he said, nodding toward the sink, "just cost me months of careful work." "Good," Nia shot back. Marcus shook his head slowly. "You still don't get it." He reached out and rested one hand on the counter right next to the knife block. Nia's pulse started pounding louder. Amari whispered behind her, "Miss Nia." Nia kept her eyes locked on Marcus. "You planning to grab a knife?" she asked calmly. Marcus chuckled under his breath. "You always were dramatic." But his hand didn't move away from the knives. The silence stretched between them, then Marcus leaned a little closer. "You really think anyone gonna believe you?" he asked. Nia frowned. "What?" Marcus spread his hands slightly. "You got headaches, vision problems, exhaustion. Doctors already think something wrong with you." A cold wave rolled through Nia's chest. "They'll think I'm crazy," she said quietly. Marcus's smile returned. "Exactly." Amari started crying again. "You're mean," the little girl shouted. Marcus looked irritated now. "That kid talks too much." He suddenly stepped closer. Instinct kicked in. Nia grabbed Amari's shoulder and pulled the girl behind her. "Don't come any closer," she warned. Marcus stopped a few feet away, studying her, then he laughed again. "Relax, Nia, I ain't gonna hurt you." He paused. "Not tonight?" The words made the room feel 10 degrees colder. "Then get out of my way," Nia said. Marcus tilted his head. "You kicking me out now? This is my house," she replied firmly. Marcus chuckled again, but it sounded hollow. "You sure about that?" Nia felt anger flare in her chest. "Yes, my name is on the deed." Marcus shrugged casually. "For now." That phrase hung in the air like smoke. Nia narrowed her eyes. "What does that mean?" Marcus leaned back against the counter, folding his arms. "It means," he said slowly, "when your health keeps getting worse, people gonna start asking questions." Nia stayed silent. Marcus continued. "You stop showing up to work, your business struggles, doctors say your brain ain't functioning right." Amari whispered. "He lying." Marcus ignored her. "Eventually," he said, "somebody suggests you need help managing your life." The pieces started connecting in Nia's head. "You were trying to get control of everything," she said. Marcus nodded slightly. "Power of attorney," he said casually. The words hit like a hammer. Nia felt sick. "You were planning to make me look mentally unstable." Marcus shrugged again. "Technically, the symptoms would have spoken for themselves." Nia clenched her fists. "You're evil." Marcus didn't even react. "You married me," he replied calmly. That one stung, but Nia refused to break. Instead, she grabbed Amari's hand. "We're leaving," she said. Marcus straightened immediately. "No, you're not." Nia stared at him. "You don't get to stop me." Marcus stepped forward again, blocking the hallway. "Oh, but I do." The tension in the room thickened instantly. "Move," Nia said. Marcus shook his head slowly. "Not until we finish talking." "We're done talking." "No," Marcus replied quietly. "You're done talking." Amari squeezed Nia's hand harder. Nia felt the little girl shaking. Marcus noticed too. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You know," he said slowly, "this whole situation would have stayed nice and quiet if someone didn't start snooping around at night." Amari froze. Nia's stomach dropped. Marcus looked directly at the little girl now, and the way he looked at her made Nia step forward instantly. "You leave her out of this," Nia snapped. Marcus tilted his head. "But she's the reason everything got messy." Amari started crying harder. I'm sorry." Nia knelt slightly, pulling the girl close. "You did nothing wrong," she whispered. Marcus's voice turned colder. "She did plenty wrong." Nia stood up again, fury burning in her eyes. "You touch her and I swear." Marcus suddenly slammed his hand down on the counter. The loud bang made Amari scream. "You swear what?" he barked. Nia didn't flinch. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then slowly he reached toward the knife block, and this time he wrapped his fingers around one of the handles. Amari gasped. Nia's heart nearly stopped. Marcus pulled the knife out halfway, then paused. The blade glinted under the kitchen lights. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't panicking, he looked almost calm, too calm. "Nia," he said quietly, "you really should have just eaten the soup." The words made chills run through her entire body. Because suddenly she understood something terrifying. Marcus wasn't just angry, he was desperate, and desperate people did dangerous things. As Marcus slowly pulled the knife free from the block, Nia realized the poison plot was never meant to end tonight. But now that his secret was out, Marcus might decide there was only one way to keep it buried. The knife slid out of the wooden block with a quiet scraping sound. It wasn't loud, but to Nia it sounded like thunder. Marcus held the knife loosely at his side, the blade catching the light from the chandelier behind him. His expression was calm, too calm for someone holding a weapon in their own kitchen. Amari clung to Nia's waist, her small body shaking. "Miss Nia," the girl whispered through tears. Nia placed one protective arm around her without looking away from Marcus. "Put the knife down," Nia said steadily. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You acting like I'm about to do something crazy." "You're standing there with a knife," she replied. Marcus glanced down at the blade like he had just noticed it. "Oh, this," he said casually, "relax. Just making sure we all understand each other." Nia's heart was pounding, but her voice stayed firm. "I understand perfectly," she said. "You poisoned your wife to steal her life." Marcus smirked faintly. "You say that like it's personal." "It is personal," Marcus shrugged. "It's business." The word made Nia's stomach twist. Amari looked up at Marcus with watery eyes. "You're a bad man," she said softly. Marcus exhaled slowly, annoyed. That kid really don't know when to stay quiet. Nia stepped forward a little, placing herself completely between Marcus and the girl. You're not scaring us, she said. Marcus laughed. Oh, you scared, he replied calmly. Your heart beating so loud I can hear it. Nia didn't deny it, because he was right, but fear wasn't the only thing in her chest anymore. Anger had joined it. You know what's funny? Marcus continued. All you had to do was keep trusting me. Nia shook her head. You should have thought about that before you started drugging my food. Marcus's eyes darkened. That was the plan, he said, slow, quiet. Nobody suspicious. He lifted the knife slightly and pointed it toward the sink. But then you had to dump the bottle. The air felt heavy. Nia's mind raced. She needed time to get Amari out, time to figure something out. Marcus, she said slowly, even if you scare us tonight, you can't fix what's already happened. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oh, you admitted everything, Marcus chuckled. To who? Nia blinked. What? Marcus gestured around the empty house. You think the wall's gonna testify? The truth in his words hit hard. There were no witnesses, no recordings, just the three of them, and one of them was a 7-year-old girl. Marcus took a small step closer. You see the problem now, he said quietly. Nia's throat tightened. Move, she said again. Marcus shook his head. No, another step, Amari whimpered behind Nia. Nia suddenly grabbed a heavy glass vase from the counter and raised it. Don't come any closer. Marcus stopped. For a moment the two of them just stared at each other. Knife, vase, fear hanging in the air like electricity. Then Marcus sighed. You always were stubborn, he muttered. Nia's voice hardened. And you always underestimated me. Marcus smirked again. You holding a vase, Nia, I'm holding steel. That don't mean I won't throw it. Marcus studied her face carefully. Then something surprising happened. He laughed, not cruelly this time, just amused. You really think I'm trying to kill you tonight? He said. Nia frowned. You just grabbed a knife. Marcus shrugged. Insurance. The word sent chills through her. Insurance for what? Marcus leaned forward slightly. For when the police start asking questions. Nia blinked. Police? Marcus nodded toward the front of the house. You didn't hear it. Nia's heart skipped. Hear what? Marcus smiled slowly. Sirens. For a second Nia thought he was bluffing. Then, faintly in the distance, a police siren echoed through the night. Amari gasped. Nia's eyes widened. Marcus chuckled softly. You really think I didn't plan for things to go wrong? He said. Nia's mind spun. You called the police. Marcus nodded. Sure did. The words made no sense. Why would you do that? She asked. Marcus twirled the knife slightly in his hand. Because when they get here, he said calmly, I'm gonna tell them my wife attacked me. Nia felt the world tilt. What? Marcus pointed at the vase she was holding. You already holding the weapon. Her stomach dropped. And with all those medical problems you've been having, Marcus continued, they gonna think you had some kinda mental breakdown. Amari started crying again. He lying? Marcus shrugged. Kid testimony ain't exactly strong in court. Nia's grip tightened on the vase. You're insane, Marcus smiled. No, he said softly, I'm prepared. The sirens were getting louder now, closer, much closer. Marcus slowly set the knife down on the counter, but not out of reach. Then he stepped backward and raised his hands slightly, just like someone trying to look innocent. Go ahead, he said calmly. Tell them whatever story you want. Nia's chest was heaving, because suddenly she understood something terrifying. Marcus had just flipped the entire situation, and if the police walked in right now, it might look like she was the dangerous one. As the police sirens grew louder outside the house, Nia realized Marcus hadn't just poisoned her, he had set the perfect trap to make the world believe she was the one who had lost her mind. The sirens outside grew louder. Closer. Closer? The flashing blue and red lights began reflecting faintly through the front windows, casting strange colors across the walls of the house. The once peaceful dining room now looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. Nia's grip on the glass vase tightened. Marcus stood near the counter with his hands slightly raised, looking calm, almost relaxed. The knife was now resting beside him on the marble surface, but it was still within easy reach. You better put that down before they walk in, Marcus said smoothly, nodding toward the vase in her hand. Nia didn't move. You set this up, she said quietly. Marcus gave a slow shrug. I prepared for possibilities. Behind Nia, Amari whispered nervously, Miss Nia, the police. Nia glanced down at the girl. Amari's face was pale and streaked with tears, her small hands gripping Nia's shirt like she might disappear if she let go. Nia bent slightly and whispered to her, "It's okay, just stay behind me." Marcus rolled his eyes. "Yeah, that's real comforting." Nia straightened again, her mind racing. Marcus had called the police first. That meant his story would reach them before hers. He had already planted the narrative. A sick wife, a violent breakdown, an unstable woman holding a weapon. Marcus smiled faintly. "You starting to see the picture now," he said. The sirens cut off outside. Silence fell for a second. Then car doors slammed. Nia's heart jumped into her throat. Marcus stepped a little farther away from the counter and lifted his hands higher like someone cooperating with authorities. "You should really put that vase down," he repeated calmly. Nia stared at him. "You poisoned me." Marcus shrugged again. "That's a pretty wild claim." Footsteps sounded outside the front door, heavy, purposeful. Amari whispered, "They hear." Marcus suddenly raised his voice loud enough to carry across the house. "Help in here." Nia's stomach dropped. "You're unbelievable," she whispered. Marcus ignored her. "Kitchen," he shouted again. The front door burst open. "Police, anybody inside? Back here," Marcus yelled. Two officers rushed into the kitchen moments later, hands near their holsters. Everything happened fast. One officer saw Nia holding the vase. "Ma'am, put the object down," he commanded immediately. Nia froze. "Put it down now," the officer repeated sharply. Marcus stood a few feet away with his hands raised. "Officers," he said quickly, sounding shaken now, "my wife's been acting strange all night. I think she's having some kind of episode." Nia stared at him in disbelief. "That's not true, ma'am." "Drop the object," the second officer said firmly. Amari began crying again. "Don't hurt Miss Nia." One officer glanced at the child but stayed focused on Nia. "Ma'am, we don't want anyone getting hurt." "Put it down." Nia slowly lowered the vase. Her mind was spinning. Marcus spoke again, voice calm but carefully nervous. "She grabbed that from the counter and started yelling, saying I poisoned her." Nia snapped her head toward him. "Because you did." Marcus shook his head sadly. "See what I mean?" The officers exchanged quick looks. One stepped closer to Nia. "Ma'am, are you feeling okay tonight?" Nia felt anger surge through her chest. "I'm perfectly fine," she said. "My husband has been secretly putting something in my food for months." Marcus sighed loudly. "Officers, she's been dealing with medical issues. Severe headaches, vision problems. Doctors think it might be neurological." The officer's expression shifted slightly. Exactly the reaction Marcus had hoped for. Nia saw it immediately. "He's lying," she insisted. "Ask the girl, she saw him doing it." Both officers looked toward Amari. The little girl wiped her eyes. "It's true," she cried. "He put drops in her soup." Marcus gave a tired shake of his head. "That child has a wild imagination. She must have misunderstood something." Nia clenched her fists. "You admitted it 5 minutes ago." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "In front of who?" The words hit hard. The officers looked uncertain now. The second officer glanced at the knife on the counter. "What's the knife doing there?" he asked. Marcus quickly responded. "I grabbed it because she started threatening me with that vase." Nia's breath caught. "That's not what happened." But the scene in front of the officers told a different story. Marcus, calm, cooperative, hands raised. Nia, angry, holding a heavy object moments earlier. One officer stepped slightly closer to her. "Ma'am, we need everyone to calm down." Nia's voice trembled with frustration. "You're being manipulated. He planned this." Marcus lowered his voice softly. "You see what I've been dealing with?" The officer sighed. "All right," he said carefully. "Let's take a breath and sort this out." But Nia could already feel the situation slipping out of her control. Marcus had built the perfect trap, and now the police were standing inside it. As the officers began questioning everyone in the kitchen, Nia suddenly realized the one thing Marcus hadn't planned for: the quiet little girl standing beside her might hold the only evidence that could destroy his entire scheme. The kitchen felt like it was holding its breath. The two officers stood between Nia and Marcus, their attention shifting back and forth as they tried to piece together what was happening. The flashing lights from outside painted the walls red and blue, making everything look unreal. Nia forced herself to stay calm. If she lost control now, Marcus would win. "Officer," she said carefully, "please listen to me." Marcus gave a quiet sigh like he'd heard this before. "She's been like this all evening," he said. Nia ignored him. My husband has been secretly putting something in my food for months, that's why I've been sick. The first officer crossed his arms slightly. Do you have proof of that? Nia hesitated, because that was the problem. Marcus had been careful. Too careful, but before she could answer, a small voice spoke up. I saw it. Both officers looked down. Amari stood beside Nia, wiping tears from her cheeks but trying her best to be brave. I saw him do it, she repeated. Marcus chuckled softly. Kid probably saw me adding vitamins. Amari shook her head immediately. No, it wasn't vitamins. One officer crouched down to the girl's level. Hey there, he said gently. What's your name? Amari, she sniffled. Okay, Amari, the officer said kindly. Can you tell me what you saw? Marcus shifted his weight slightly. Nia noticed. For the first time that night, Marcus looked a little nervous. Amari pointed toward the sink. He had a little brown bottle, she said. He poured drops into Miss Nia's food when she wasn't looking. Marcus scoffed. That sounds like medicine. Amari shook her head again. No. He said she would get weaker. The officer's eyebrows lifted slightly. Marcus quickly spoke up. Kids mishear things all the time. But the second officer was already scanning the kitchen. Where's the bottle? He asked. Marcus answered instantly. She dumped it. All eyes turned to the sink. Nia nodded. Yes, I poured it out because I didn't trust it. The officer walked over and looked into the drain. Of course, nothing was left, just the faint smell of food and soap. Marcus spread his hands casually. See? But the officer didn't step away immediately. Instead, he glanced around the counter. His gaze landed on the empty brown bottle lying near the sink. He picked it up. Marcus's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Mind if we take a look at this? The officer asked. Marcus shrugged. Go ahead, it's probably just herbal drops. The officer twisted the cap open and sniffed cautiously. His expression didn't change, but he handed the bottle to his partner. Bag that, he said quietly. Marcus laughed lightly. You guys really testing vitamins? The second officer placed the bottle into an evidence bag anyway. Standard procedure. Nia felt a tiny spark of hope flicker inside her chest. Marcus noticed it. His eyes narrowed slightly, then he quickly changed tactics. Look, he said, turning to the officers. My wife's been under a lot of stress lately. The officer ignored him for a moment and looked back at Amari. Sweetheart, he asked gently, how many times did you see him do that? Amari thought for a moment. A lot, she said quietly, like every night. Marcus sighed loudly. This is ridiculous. The officer stood up again. You said your wife has been having medical symptoms? Marcus nodded. Headaches, vision issues. Dizziness? The officer looked toward Nia. Is that true? Yes, she replied. Marcus quickly added, doctors think it could be neurological. The officer nodded slowly. Or chemical. Marcus froze just slightly, but Nia saw it. The officer continued speaking calmly. If someone had been ingesting a harmful substance over time, those symptoms might appear. Marcus forced a laugh. That's a big assumption. Maybe, the officer replied. Then he looked directly at Nia. Ma'am, have you seen a doctor recently? Yes. Do you have medical records? Nia nodded slowly. At the hospital. Marcus's shoulders stiffened. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner, then he spoke again. Well, he said, a toxicology test might clear things up. Marcus's confident smile flickered, just for a second, but it was enough, because Nia suddenly saw the truth. Marcus hadn't expected the officers to actually investigate. He thought they would dismiss her immediately, and now the situation was shifting. The officer turned back toward Marcus. Sir, we're going to need to ask you a few more questions. Marcus forced his calm mask back on. Of course. But Nia could see the tension in his jaw. The officers continued examining the kitchen. One of them pointed at the knife on the counter. And what happened with this? Marcus answered smoothly. I grabbed it because she was threatening me. Nia shook her head immediately. He reached for it first. Amari spoke again. That's true, Marcus exhaled slowly. This is getting ridiculous. But the officers weren't dismissing anyone anymore. They were observing, studying, connecting pieces, and Marcus could feel control slipping away. The officer holding the evidence bag looked at the bottle again. Lab will tell us what's inside. Marcus said nothing. For the first time that night, he looked worried, and Nia felt something she hadn't felt all evening, hope, but she also knew something else. Marcus wasn't the kind of man who gave up easily. As the officers began collecting evidence in the kitchen, Marcus realized his carefully planned trap was starting to collapse, and the desperate move he made next could change everything in a matter of seconds. The kitchen felt heavier with every passing second. One officer was sealing the brown bottle inside an evidence bag while the other kept asking quiet questions. The red and blue lights outside still flashed through the windows, painting slow-moving shadows across the room. Nia stood beside Amari, her arm wrapped protectively around the little girl's shoulders. Marcus, however, looked different now, still calm, still composed, but Nia noticed something else behind his eyes: calculation. The officer holding the evidence bag glanced at Marcus again. "Sir, we're going to send this to the lab," he said. "If there's anything harmful inside, we'll know soon enough." Marcus gave a tight smile. "Knock yourselves out." But Nia saw his fingers flex slightly, a sign of tension. The other officer turned to Nia. "Ma'am, we'd like to ask a few questions about your medical symptoms." Nia nodded. "I've had headaches for months. My eyesight started getting blurry too. Doctors couldn't figure out why." Marcus spoke up again. "She's been under a lot of pressure at work." The officer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he wrote something down in a small notebook. Nia felt a small spark of relief. Finally, someone was taking this seriously, but Marcus suddenly cleared his throat. "Actually," he said slowly, "there's something I should mention." Nia's stomach tightened. Because Marcus only spoke like that when he was about to twist the story, the officers looked up. "What is it?" one asked. Marcus sighed like he was carrying a heavy burden. "My wife has been struggling lately," he said carefully. "Stress. Anxiety. Doctors even mentioned possible neurological issues." Nia's jaw clenched. "Stop lying." Marcus ignored her. "She's been accusing people at work of sabotage too." "That's not true," Nia snapped. Marcus raised his hands defensively. "See what I mean?" The officer held up a hand. "Let's keep things calm." Amari tugged on Nia's sleeve nervously. "Miss Nia." Nia squeezed the girl's shoulder reassuringly. Marcus continued. "I didn't want to say anything earlier because it's embarrassing for her, but she's been having episodes." Nia stared at him in disbelief. "You're unbelievable." The officer studying Marcus looked thoughtful. "What kind of episodes?" Marcus shrugged. "Paranoia, mood swings. She's convinced people are plotting against her." Nia's chest burned with anger. "He's trying to make me look crazy." Marcus shook his head sadly. "I'm just telling the truth." But the second officer wasn't looking at Marcus anymore. He was looking at Amari. The girl was quietly holding onto Nia's hand. The officer crouched down again. "Amari," he said gently, "can you tell me something?" She nodded nervously. "Did Miss Nia ever act scary or angry toward you?" Amari shook her head quickly. "No, she's nice." The officer smiled softly. "And tonight? Did she threaten anyone before your uncle grabbed that knife?" Amari's eyes widened. "No, he grabbed it first." Marcus sighed loudly. "This is going nowhere." But the officer stood up again, his expression thoughtful. "You said the symptoms started months ago," he said to Nia. "Yes. And your husband has been preparing most of your meals?" Nia nodded. Marcus quickly interjected. "I cook because she's busy." The officer looked between them. "Convenient." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "You implying something?" "I'm observing," the officer replied calmly. For the first time that night, Marcus's confident posture shifted, just slightly. The officer holding the evidence bag walked toward the door. "We'll get this tested immediately." Marcus forced another smile. "Great." But the officer wasn't finished. He turned back toward Marcus. "Sir, we're also going to need you to come down to the station for a formal statement." Marcus blinked. "Tonight?" "Yes." Marcus laughed lightly. "You can't be serious." The officer's expression didn't change. "This situation involves potential poisoning." Marcus glanced at Nia, then back at the officers. "Based on the word of a child and a stressed-out wife," the officer folded his arms. "Based on evidence we're investigating." Nia saw something shift in Marcus's face. The calm mask cracked, just a little. "Look," Marcus said slowly, "I think everyone's blowing this way out of proportion." The officer stepped closer. "Sir, I'm going to ask again, are you willing to cooperate?" Marcus hesitated, just for a second, but that second said everything. Nia suddenly realized something important. Marcus wasn't afraid of the police. He was afraid of the test results. Because if the lab confirmed the liquid was poison, his entire plan would collapse. The officer waited. Marcus finally forced a smile. Of course, he said, but his eyes were colder now. And Nia had a sinking feeling. Marcus had been cornered, and desperate men did desperate things. As the officers prepared to escort Marcus to the station, Nia noticed the dangerous look in his eyes, and she realized he might try one last reckless move before the truth about the poison reached the lab. The kitchen had grown strangely quiet. The flashing police lights outside still painted the walls with slow waves of red and blue, but inside the room nobody was speaking. Marcus stood near the counter, his jaw tight, eyes moving slowly between the officers, the evidence bag, and Nia. For the first time that night, he looked trapped. The officer closest to him spoke calmly. "Sir, we're going to head down to the station and get a formal statement from you." Marcus forced a polite smile. "Sure. No problem." But Nia saw through it immediately. Marcus only smiled like that when he was hiding something. The second officer stepped toward the door. "Let's go ahead," and the sentence never finished, because suddenly Marcus moved, fast. Before anyone could react, he lunged sideways toward the counter and grabbed the knife again. Amari screamed. The officers reacted instantly. "Drop the knife," one shouted. Marcus backed away quickly, holding the blade out in front of him. His calm mask was completely gone now. "You think you're taking me down for something I didn't do," he snapped. Nia's heart slammed against her ribs. "Marcus, stop," but Marcus's eyes were wild now. "You should have just eaten the soup," he said bitterly. One officer slowly reached toward his radio. "Sir, put the knife down right now." Marcus laughed harshly. "You already decided I'm guilty." "We're investigating," the officer replied firmly. Marcus shook his head. "No, you're picking sides." He glanced briefly toward the front door. Then toward the hallway, like he was calculating something. The officers noticed. "Don't even think about it," one warned. Marcus exhaled slowly, then he looked directly at Nia. "This is your fault." Nia stepped forward slightly. "No. This is the consequence of what you did." Marcus's grip on the knife tightened. "You ruined everything." Nia shook her head. "You ruined it when you tried to poison your own wife." Marcus laughed again, but there was no humor left in it. "I was trying to build something. You were trying to steal my life." The tension in the room crackled. One officer spoke carefully. "Sir, nobody needs to get hurt tonight." Marcus's breathing was heavy now, his eyes flicked toward Amari. The little girl was trembling behind Nia. "Move the kid," Marcus muttered. Nia instantly stepped more firmly in front of her. "No," Marcus's voice hardened. "I said move her. You don't get to give orders anymore." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his expression shifted again, not anger, not fear, desperation. He slowly backed toward the hallway. The officer stepped forward immediately. "Stop right there." Marcus raised the knife slightly. "Stay back, put the knife down." "Stay back," Marcus shouted. The officers froze for a moment. Marcus glanced again toward the front door. He was thinking about running. Nia could see it clearly, but running would make everything worse. "Marcus," she said carefully, "this ends badly if you run." Marcus smirked bitterly. "Badly for who?" Nia didn't answer. Instead, she held his gaze. "You know the truth will come out." Marcus shook his head. "Not if I'm not here." The officers took another cautious step forward. "Sir," Marcus suddenly spun toward the hallway like he was about to bolt, but before he could move, Amari shouted, "Don't." The sound startled him just enough. One officer lunged forward. "Now!" The second officer moved at the same time. Marcus tried to jerk away, but it was too late. The officer grabbed his arm, twisting it sharply. The knife clattered across the tile floor. Marcus struggled violently. "Get off me!" But the officers were stronger. Within seconds, Marcus was forced face down against the counter. Metal cuffs snapped around his wrists. "You're under arrest," one officer said firmly. Marcus kept fighting for another moment, then finally stopped. Breathing hard, sweat on his forehead, his plan had collapsed completely. The officer picked up the knife carefully and stepped away. Marcus lifted his head just enough to glare at Nia. "You think this means you won?" he muttered. Nia stared back at him. "I didn't want to win," she said quietly. "I just wanted the truth." Marcus laughed weakly. "Truth doesn't matter." Nia shook her head slowly. "It does now." Because Marcus wasn't walking away from this anymore, the officers pulled him to his feet and began guiding him toward the door. Amari hugged Nia tightly. "Is he going to jail?" she whispered. Nia held the girl close. "Yes," she said softly. Marcus turned his head one last time before they reached the door, and the look in his eyes was colder than ever. "Don't celebrate yet," he said quietly. Nia felt a chill run through her because even in handcuffs Marcus still sounded confident, and that made her wonder what was he still planning. As the police car lights faded down the street with Marcus in custody, Nia thought the nightmare was finally over, until the officer holding the evidence bag received a call that made his face suddenly turn pale. The police car doors slammed shut outside. Marcus was placed in the back seat, his hands cuffed behind him, his expression cold and unreadable. The red and blue lights flashed across his face as one officer closed the door. For a moment, Marcus locked eyes with Nia through the window. Even now, he looked confident, almost satisfied. Then the police car pulled away, disappearing down the street. The flashing lights slowly faded. Silence returned to the house. Nia stood in the doorway holding Amari close, her heart still racing. The night air felt cooler against her skin, but her mind was still spinning from everything that had happened. Inside the house, one officer remained behind. He was the same officer who had bagged the small brown bottle. He stepped toward the kitchen table and placed the evidence bag carefully on the surface. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. Nia nodded slowly. "I think so." Amari looked up at her. "Is he really gone?" "Yes," Nia whispered softly. "He's gone." But the officer didn't look relaxed. He was staring at his phone now. The screen lit up as it began to ring. He answered quickly. "This is Officer Daniels." Nia watched his face carefully as he listened. At first his expression was neutral, then his eyebrows slowly pulled together. "What?" he said quietly. Nia's stomach tightened. The officer turned slightly away, still listening. "Yes, we recovered the bottle." He paused, then he spoke again. "You're sure?" Nia's heart started beating faster. The officer slowly lowered the phone from his ear. His expression had changed. "Something serious, something unexpected. What is it?" Nia asked nervously. Officer Daniels looked at her. "The lab ran a rapid analysis on residue from the bottle." Nia swallowed. "And," the officer hesitated for a second, then he spoke. "It wasn't poison." The words hung in the air like a shockwave. Nia blinked. "What?" Amari looked confused. "But he said he was making her sick," the girl whispered. Officer Daniels nodded slowly. "That's the strange part." Nia felt the room tilt slightly. "If it wasn't poison, then what was it?" The officer picked up the evidence bag and examined the small bottle again. "The substance appears to be a type of nerve suppressant." Nia frowned. "What does that mean?" "It's a chemical compound sometimes used in certain experimental treatments." Nia's confusion deepened. "Treatments?" Officer Daniels nodded. "It can affect muscle coordination, energy levels, and vision if taken in the wrong doses." Nia's heart sank. "That sounds exactly like what's been happening to me." "Yes," the officer replied. "But here's the unusual part." Nia waited. "This chemical isn't something you can buy at a store." The air felt heavy again. "Where would someone get it?" she asked. Officer Daniels looked serious. "It's usually found in medical research environments." Nia blinked. "Like hospitals or laboratories?" Nia's mind started racing. Marcus didn't work in a lab, he was a business consultant, so how did he get something like that? The officer continued. "We're going to investigate where the substance came from." Nia slowly sat down in a chair. Everything felt surreal. "So he really was poisoning me, just not with traditional poison." The officer nodded. "Correct?" Amari squeezed Nia's hand. "I told you he was bad." Nia pulled the girl into a hug. "You were very brave tonight," she said softly, but something about Marcus's earlier confidence still bothered her. He hadn't looked scared when he was arrested. He had looked prepared. Officer Daniels checked his phone again. "Another thing," he added. Nia looked up. "The compound in the bottle, it's still under clinical study." "What does that mean?" "It means it shouldn't legally be in someone's house." A chill ran down Nia's spine. "So how did Marcus get it?" The officer shook his head. "That's what we're going to find out." He paused, then his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "This is strange." "What?" Nia asked. He looked back at her. "That chemical compound is linked to a private research facility." Nia felt uneasy. "What kind of research?" The officer hesitated. "Neurological control studies." Nia's stomach dropped. "Control?" The officer nodded. "Studies about influencing brain function and behavior." The room went silent. Suddenly Marcus's plan didn't sound like simple greed anymore. It sounded bigger, much bigger. Officer Daniels picked up the evidence bag again. "We're going to need to ask you a lot more questions, Miss Banks." Nia nodded slowly, because the nightmare she thought was over might have just uncovered something far more dangerous. Amari looked up at her again. Is it finished now? Nia held the girl tightly, but she couldn't answer, because deep down she had a terrible feeling. Marcus wasn't just trying to steal her company, he might have been part of something far more complicated. Something that was still out there. Just as Nia began processing the shocking truth about the mysterious chemical, Officer Daniels received one final message that revealed something even more disturbing. Marcus wasn't the only person involved in the experiment. The house felt quieter than it had all night. But it wasn't peaceful quiet. It was the kind of quiet that follows something dangerous when the dust settles but the questions are just beginning. Nia sat at the kitchen table, one arm wrapped around Amari while Officer Daniels stood nearby with his phone in his hand. The small evidence bag with the empty brown bottle rested on the counter. The flashing police lights were gone now. Marcus was gone, but the weight of what Officer Daniels had just said still hung in the air. Neurological control studies. Nia rubbed her temples slowly. You're saying the chemical he used on me, it's part of some research experiment? Officer Daniels nodded carefully. That's what the database is showing. Amari looked confused. Like science stuff? Yes, the officer replied gently, but science that's supposed to stay inside controlled labs. Nia felt her stomach twist. So Marcus somehow got his hands on something illegal. Looks that way. The officer's phone buzzed again. He glanced down at it, reading the new message. And this time his expression changed even more. Serious, concerned. Nia noticed immediately. What is it? She asked. Officer Daniels exhaled slowly. This just came in from the lab contact. He hesitated for a moment, then looked directly at her. The compound in that bottle, it's part of an experimental neurological trial. Nia frowned. What kind of trial? The officer looked uneasy. A study designed to influence cognitive performance and behavioral control. Nia's mind struggled to process the words. You mean mind control? Not exactly, he replied carefully. But the research is meant to affect decision-making, coordination, and mental focus. Nia felt chills run down her arms. That's exactly what's been happening to me, Officer Daniels nodded. Yes, Amari squeezed Nia's arm tighter. So he was doing science experiments on her? The little girl asked softly. The officer didn't answer right away. But his silence said enough. Nia leaned back in her chair, stunned. Marcus hadn't just tried to poison her, he had been experimenting on her, and suddenly something Marcus said earlier came rushing back into her mind. I was trying to build something. At the time it sounded like greed, now it sounded like something else. Nia looked up at the officer. How many people have access to that chemical? Very few, Daniels replied. It's tightly controlled by the research facility, which means Marcus didn't just stumble across it. Exactly, Nia's heart sank. So he was working with someone. Officer Daniels nodded slowly. That's what we're starting to think. Amari whispered nervously. More bad people? Nia held the girl's hand. We don't know yet. But the officer's phone buzzed again. He read the message carefully this time, then looked up at Nia. You might want to sit down, Nia frowned. I'm already sitting. Daniels gave a faint nod. Good. He turned the phone screen toward her. There's another development. Nia stared at the message. Marcus Banks was not the registered recipient of the chemical compound. Her brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means someone else checked it out from the research facility. Nia's stomach tightened. Who? Officer Daniels looked back at the screen, then read the name slowly. Dr. Elaine Carter. Nia blinked. The name sounded familiar, very familiar, then it hit her. Dr. Carter was the neurologist she had been seeing for the past 2 months. The same doctor who kept running tests on her vision. The same doctor who kept saying they couldn't figure out what was wrong. Nia's blood ran cold. That's my doctor. Officer Daniels' expression hardened. Are you sure? Yes. The realization slammed into her chest like a punch. Dr. Carter had been the one monitoring her symptoms, tracking her decline, writing reports. If Marcus had been slowly poisoning her with an experimental compound, then Dr. Carter hadn't been trying to cure her, she had been studying her. Amari looked back and forth between them. What's wrong? Nia felt sick. My doctor might be involved, she whispered. Officer Daniels straightened immediately. That changes things. Nia shook her head slowly. This wasn't just Marcus trying to steal my company. Daniels nodded grimly. No, This looks like something much bigger. The room fell silent again because if a research doctor and her husband were both involved, then the nightmare Nia had been living might have been planned from the beginning. Officer Daniels grabbed his radio. "I'm calling this in," he said. Nia sat there frozen. Marcus had already been arrested, but suddenly she realized something terrifying. Marcus might not have been the mastermind. He might have just been the middleman, and somewhere out there, the real person behind the experiment might still be watching. As Officer Daniels prepared to alert investigators about Dr. Carter, Nia's phone suddenly rang and the caller ID revealed a name that made her blood run cold. Dr. Elaine Carter. The phone rang again. Nia stared at the screen like it might explode. Dr. Elaine Carter, the name glowed on the display, bright and impossible to ignore. Her stomach dropped. Officer Daniels noticed immediately. "Who is it?" he asked. Nia swallowed hard. "My doctor," Daniels straightened. "The one connected to the compound?" "Yes." The phone kept ringing. Amari looked up nervously. "Are you gonna answer?" Nia hesitated. Then slowly pressed accept and lifted the phone to her ear. "Hello?" For a second there was only silence on the line, then a calm voice spoke. "Good evening, Nia." The voice was smooth, professional. Exactly the same voice Nia had heard during every appointment at the clinic, but now it sounded different, colder. "I was wondering when you'd answer," Dr. Carter continued. Nia's fingers tightened around the phone. "How did you know to call me tonight?" Dr. Carter chuckled softly. "Because Marcus was supposed to update me by now." Officer Daniels' eyes widened slightly. Nia felt a chill run through her entire body. "He's been arrested," she said quietly. There was a pause, a long pause, then Dr. Carter sighed. "That's unfortunate." The calmness of the response made Nia's stomach twist. "You've been experimenting on me," Nia said, another soft chuckle. "Such an ugly word. You've been drugging me." "Technically," Dr. Carter replied. "Marcus administered the compound." Nia's anger flared. "You designed it?" "Yes," Dr. Carter said calmly. The room went silent. Officer Daniels quickly turned on his phone recorder. Nia could hear him whispering quietly into his radio as he stepped a few feet away, but Nia stayed focused on the voice in her ear. "Why?" she demanded. Dr. Carter answered immediately. "Because the research matters." "What research?" "The human brain," Carter replied smoothly. "You see, Nia, the compound was designed to influence cognitive performance and decision-making patterns." Nia's hands trembled. "You used me as a test subject. You were the perfect candidate." The words made Nia sick. "What do you mean?" Dr. Carter explained calmly like she was discussing a science lecture. "You're intelligent, successful, highly driven. If the compound could alter someone like you slowly, the possibilities would be enormous." Nia shook her head in disbelief. "You destroyed my health." "Temporary side effects," Carter said dismissively. "Temporary," Nia snapped. "My vision is fading. The dosage may have been slightly miscalculated." The casual tone was horrifying. Nia's voice dropped. "You're insane," Dr. Carter laughed softly. "Every great discovery sounds insane at first." Officer Daniels returned quietly and nodded toward Nia. The call was being traced. Nia kept talking. "You ruined my life." "No," Carter replied. "I advanced science." Nia felt anger surge through her chest. "You'll go to prison for this." There was a small pause, then Carter spoke again. "You assume I'll be caught." The words sent chills down Nia's spine. But Officer Daniels suddenly raised a finger, signaling something important. The trace was working. Nia forced herself to stay calm. "Marcus already told the police everything." That was a lie, but it worked. Dr. Carter's voice sharpened slightly. "He wouldn't dare." "Why?" Nia pressed. "Because he knows how valuable the project is." Officer Daniels whispered to Nia quietly. "Keep her talking." Nia nodded slightly. "How many other people have you done this to?" she asked. Another pause, then Carter answered calmly. "You were the first full trial." The words made the room feel colder. "So I was just an experiment." "Yes," Nia felt tears sting her eyes. But she kept her voice steady. "You're not getting away with it." Officer Daniels suddenly gave a thumbs up. They had the location. Police units were already on the way. Nia took a breath. "They're coming for you," she said. Dr. Carter laughed. "We'll see." Then the line went dead. Silence filled the kitchen again. Officer Daniels lowered his radio. "We got her location," he said. Nia closed her eyes briefly. The nightmare was finally reaching its end. Days later, Dr. Elaine Carter was arrested at her private research facility. The illegal neurological experiments were uncovered. Marcus confessed to his role in exchange for a reduced sentence. And the experimental compound was banned from further human testing. Weeks later, Nia sat in her living room with Amari beside her. The doctors had started treatment to reverse the chemical effects. Her vision was slowly improving. It would take time, but she was healing. Amari smiled up at her. "You're gonna be okay now." Nia hugged the little girl tightly. "Yes," she said softly, because the truth had finally come out: Marcus's greed, Dr. Carter's dangerous ambition, and the experiment that nearly destroyed her life. But one brave little girl had changed everything. If Amari hadn't spoken up that night, Nia might never have known the truth. And sometimes, the smallest voice in the room is the one that saves everyone. If this story shocked you or kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure you hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next powerful story. Speech balloon, comment below, what would you have done if you were in Nia's place? And remember, sometimes the smallest voice can reveal the biggest truth. Turn on the notification bell because the next story might be even more intense.